It's a big thrill and honour to be here. I walked in and I knew no one, but then I found a few familiar faces because I am not an eventing person at all. I'm not even a rider. And you're going to find out during the course of my presentation a lot of things that I'm not. But it's true, I did start life, or at least I am a vet. That's one of the constants. But then I was thinking there was some little link to eventing in my life. So I don't know if any of you recognise this guy. Now, you'd want to be a fair age. His name is on the back. He's Jerzy Grabowski. So who's Jerzy? Anyone know? Well, in 1967, the European Eventing Championships were held here in Punchestown. I was young. My dad was one of the vets on duty, and he was on duty way over there at Sheila Burke's cottage, right? And I was in the car with him. And everything was going grand. But then a Polish horse came along, and there was a ditch in front of a fence, and the horse fell into the ditch, upended. A grey horse, I can remember that much. And that was fine, and attempts tried to get him out, and flags going, and whistles, there were whistles being blown. And next thing, this very imposing man in a full Polish cavalry uniform came along. You must do something! You must do something! But unfortunately, the only thing that could be done was the horse was shot. So that was my introduction to eventing, my link to eventing. And more usually, I do some race day stewarding, and I'd be in that building over there, stewarding here at the races in Punchestown. So that's just a slight introduction. The next slide is a kind of my story, I suppose. I was lucky enough to grow up at the National Stud, went to the vet college in UCD, spent 37 odd years as a repro vet, so that was my normal position. In the meantime, I developed a stud farm in Laois with my husband, Tinnakill House, and I got involved in racing regulation and governance. And that's when the welfare thing started to kind of come to me, because you'd be sitting at a table, committee table, you know what it's like, and because you're a vet and welfare comes up, they turn to you and they say, so what about the welfare of the horse in this situation? And I actually hadn't a clue. We had one lecture in final year in college on welfare across all species. So I knew nothing. But I had to wing it and pretend and whatever. And I thought I have to do something about this. So in 2020, I suppose COVID might probably have something to do with it. I went back to college. I enrolled in a master's program at the University of Edinburgh on international animal welfare, ethics and law. It was really, really fascinating. I thought as a vet this was going to be a piece of cake, but actually it wasn't, because the first thing I discovered, and I'll tell you a little bit about the other things I discovered, but the first thing I discovered was that welfare is not just healthcare. I thought as a vet I was looking after the welfare of the horses. I was to an extent, but not to the full extent. So that was really interesting. We had a class of 30, there were only 6 vets in that class. There was animal scientists, there was zoologists, there was lab animal people, there were lawyers, there was a girl who was a script writer in Hollywood. So we had a really broad, and her interest was pet rats. So when we were on our Zooms and our webinars, she'd have her pet rats going. Anyway, so it takes all sorts. But we all got through it, and we all did our dissertation. And out of that then, a couple of things happened for me. One is that I started a podcast. So this is a plug for the podcast. You'll hear a little bit more about it later. But podcast called Changing Rein with a friend from Australia, actually. Sorry, that's gone, is it? Is that gone? No. A friend from Australia called Karen Luke, and we look at horse sport through a welfare lens. And we've had William Micklem, we've had Fran Berry, we've had Andrew McLean, we've had all sorts of interesting people, and our new season starts next week, so you can tune in for that. So that's kind of my background, and I also do a little bit of lecturing in UCD on animal welfare for both animal science students and vet students. So what did I learn? Welfare more than good care. We're all horse people in this room. We all know about horse husbandry. Welfare is about more than that. Animals communicate. I think Sharon asked me what was the number one thing I learned, and I would say the importance of behaviour. It's the only way animals can communicate with us is through their behaviour. They can't talk. We need to understand what they're trying to tell us. Early life experiences, very important impact on behaviour, not really for discussion today, but it was something really struck me. You can't just go out and use a one-size-fits-all welfare assessment tool to see how the welfare is in your yard or stable or farm. You have to do it in context. For every animal, there's a human, whether they're on the end of a lead rope or they're in the farmyard. They are the person who influences the welfare of that animal most. And above all, human behaviour. If we don't understand what makes people tick in terms of how they interact with animals, we can't understand how animals tick or how we can improve their welfare. This is just a slide to show my brain after my master's, but one half of my brain totally frazzled. Oh, I learned, apart from animal welfare in the middle, all these words up there were new. I didn't know any of them. And the ones that I have kind of highlighted are ones that we might mention a little bit as we go through. So, book learning, loads of book learning. I love reading. And these are all the books I kind of collected over the few years of the Masters. But that's all well and good. You have to translate it into practice. That's, what happens on the ground, in your yard, on your farm. And I'm here today not talking about the coaching or the riding or the competition side of things, because I know nothing about that. What I'm talking about is something that the public is very concerned about, which is the other 23 hours. And I think for that reason, what I have to say and what equine welfare science has to say applies across the board, not just to racing or to show jumping or to dressage or it applies right across all the disciplines. And just yesterday I saw that this journal is calling for articles, scientific research articles on emergent practices and technologies for the other 23 hours of equidae management. So a brand new journal issue that's going to be looking at what I'm talking about today. So this is a really hot current topic. There's only one article in it so far. It's one of these online things. They'll add to it over the next 6 months. I just thought that was interesting. So I put this slide up because Bridget and I have been friends for a long time. We share that stud vet repro background, but we also share the fact that we breed horses. So on the left is a horse that I bred with my husband, a horse called State of Rest. He won 4 Group 1s. And on the right, of course, is Bridget's horse. And we think, two different disciplines, they're very different, but actually they're not. They're 2 horses, there may be 2 different worlds, but actually what happens within the other 23 hours of both those horses' lives is equally important. And what do the public think? The public, my belief, and I think this is what most people would say that look at this from the outset, what do the public think? The public realise that we have a partnership with our horses, and they would like to think that if there's such a thing as a horse welfareometer, that the dial is in favour of the horse. I think that's what they would hope. But we're humans, we're all humans, and we tend to take a human-centric view of life. And if you're involved in horses, there's things like success, medals, ribbons, Group 1s. There's what other people do. There's that whole group think thing. There's things that make it easier for you to manage your horses. There's the cost of things, whether things are expensive, whether it's bedding or feed or transport or insurance. There's time. We're all time poor. And yet the horse is our partner. We're supposed to be there with them and for them. And as I say, the public think the dial is tilted towards the horse. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about the 5 domains because it's a really useful framework in which we can think about how we can best keep that dial over to the right. And I'm going to be asking some questions, don't expect answers, but just I want you to do a little bit of thinking. A friend of mine calls these provocations. Just something to make you think, I hadn't thought about that before. The provocation here is on this scale of the horse as a tool of the trade, a commodity, something to win your races, something to win your badminton or burley or wherever, or a living, feeling being. Where do you sit? Where do you sit on that scale? Now, I think we all sit at different places on that scale at different times. It's not always the horse, it's not always us, but somewhere probably in the middle. So I think he's probably where most of us are. But it's just something to think about because there is a tendency, and again, the public are inclined to think that we are too much to the left. So we just need to think about how can we make sure that we're not there. And this, look, someone said to me quite recently, that old social licensing, if ye would all stop talking about it, it'd go away. And I wish it was that easy, but it's not going away. And it's not, didn't actually start with the horse business. This started with mining, with other industries where there's going to be disruption to a community. And the mining companies realised we're going to have to do something to make what we do acceptable. So we're going to help with relocating the school, or we're going to build parks, or we're going to do things that make what we're doing, because people don't really understand where we're at, but they know what they don't like. So we're going to have to do something about it. And that's where the whole idea of social licence came from, and it's more recently been applied to the horse. I would really recommend, so it's a community's level of acceptance of certain practices. It's basically a public acceptability of an activity. And I really recommend reading this article if you get a chance. It's actually very clearly written. At the end, I have a QR code that leads you to the references, any paper that I mention here, there's a reference to it. If you can't get them, if you don't have access to them, my email is on the last slide. You can contact me. And there's also a link. So if you don't capture the QR code, come up to me afterwards, so I can give you the link. So this graphic is actually from that paper, and trust is at the heart of social licence. Do the public trust us? And these are the other links in that, or the pieces of the jigsaw. So confidence, transparency, shared values, legitimacy, competence, and credibility. And I'm going to focus on 3 of those, the ones that have the lightning bolts. And I think shared values. If you can sit down with people and discover that they care about horses and they hear that you care about horses, you're a long, long way down the road of acceptance. So it's not about drawing up the drawbridge and say you don't know what we do. We know where we're at. That's actually not the way to do it. You have to show that you share their values, you share their concerns. In my references, I have a link to a really good webinar that the World Horse Welfare ran last year. And there's a guy from McDonald's who spoke about social licence from their perspective. Really, really worth watching. So I recommend that you have a listen to that. The other really important, I think very important aspect of social licence is credibility. Are we believable? Can they trust us? Can they believe us? And if we persist or insist on saying, we've always done it this way, or you don't know anything about horses, you don't know what, you just don't know, or we can tell you, we can educate you, you're not going to win them over. But if you can show that what you do with the horses is evidence-based, and you're going to hear me mention that quite a bit, evidence-based, if you sit down with these people and say, listen, this is what we do and this is why we do it, and then maybe again a provocation, a little bit of a self-reflection, should I do this? Not just, can I do this? So they're just some things that I think will help on the credibility side, because I think sometimes there is a credibility gap. We talk about horses being treated like kings. I grew up polishing brass latches on teak doors because that's what you did. You know what I mean? You kept the brass shining. Is that what's important? Treated like kings, and I think you think about a king being locked in his bathroom, unable to get out. You know, it's only 12 by 12. So it's not a great line to use. We do look after them extremely well. I'm not arguing with that for a second. But is it what they would want if they were given a choice? And we'll talk about that later too. So on the right, I have some of the things we do, as I say, the box, the hyperflexion, the whip. And does anyone know what the photo is on the bottom? Bridget, you might know, no? It's the guy, the polo player from Brazil with his best mare. He cloned them all. He cloned her, and that's the, yeah. That's the man, yeah. So So we can, but that's to me is we can, but should we? I suppose, certainly in racing, for example, racing's on the TV. Everyone sees what's happened. They don't know what happens behind the scenes at home. My personal view is that, and in fairness, in racing, trainers' yards can be inspected at any time by the IHRB. So they're open to scrutiny. That's not the case in other competition disciplines, competitive equestrian disciplines, and I think maybe that's something we should be thinking about, because what you can't see, you kind of doubt. You wonder what does happen. Maybe it's all nice and shiny at the event, in the venue, maybe not so good at home. So I think transparency is very important to people, and of course nowadays with mobile phones and all that goes with that, nowhere is hidden, nowhere is safe. But I don't like saying that, because I don't think we should even be thinking about doing something behind the scenes that we wouldn't do in the full light of day. And it's not just that I'm saying this, and it's not just that public have concerns about this. The FEI appointed a Welfare and Ethics and Wellbeing Commission, and one of the first things they did was a huge survey, 2 huge surveys, one of equestrians and one of the general public. Like, I think the general public, there were 15,000 respondents, and they asked them what were their concerns around horse sport. And this is a result from the equestrian side of things. So this is you, this is not the public. And these are the 6 themes that came out. And one of the themes from us, from the horse people, was the other 23 hours. Now, I don't know whether that was a concern about people seeing what we did in the other 23 hours, or whether it was, we know we should be totally transparent for the other 23 hours. But it is a concern. So that's why it's not a topic that I dreamt up. It's something that's real, that's out there. So what do? I think fundamentally we have a balance to strike. Our horses are horses, right? How can we allow them to be horses and still do what we want them to do? And it's a tricky balance. I'm not saying it's easy, but I know that everyone in this room has a brilliant problem-solving abilities. You're ingenious people, and you can find ways. So in animal welfare science and in general, and in equine welfare science in particular, what we do is we look at their innate needs. What are those animals programmed to do and to be? And whatever we find, then there has to be evidence to support this in terms of how we're going to manage them. And this didn't come out really well, but what I wanted to show here was horses have existed for 50 million years, right? We've domesticated them 5,000 years ago. That little red dot represents 5,000 years. The rest of those dots are the 50 million years that came before that. So don't tell me we domesticated out of horses all the stuff that kept them going for 50 million years. And the things that kept them going, they are free-ranging prey species. So they're used to wandering the prairies. They're used to watching out for the lions or the tigers. They eat for 16 hours a day. Okay, low quality feed, but they're programmed to graze and browse for 16 hours a day with never more than a 4-hour gap between meals. They move 15 to 30 kilometres a day. Think back to our 12 by 12 stable. And they exist in tightly knit herds because there's safety in numbers. They can look out, one horse can keep an eye for predators while the others are resting. And that's all biologically imprinted on them, and then we have domesticated them, and we have this mismatch between what they want or need and what we're actually providing. And I meant to say on that photo, that lovely photo, I'll just go back to it for a second. Lovely photo. This is from Tinnakill, from our farm. It's beautiful. We were expecting a Hong Kong Chinese client that day. One of those mares is hers, so you can see we had the chopper out and we tidied it up. It all looked great. But that's probably not an ideal paddock or pasture for horses. Do you know what I mean? It's too uniform. It's a bit of a monoculture. Probably should be a little bit less. There should be more variety in it. Beautiful photo, but I just wonder. So what have we done? We feed high starch feeds. We have improved pastures. We mostly don't allow natural ranging behaviour, and we do a fair bit of disruption of their social bonds. So they're all things that really don't match their evolutionary needs. So you might say, so where's the evidence for all this? There is so much work. Animal welfare science as a science is a young science. It really only started in the mid-60s around factory farming and concerns people had about intensive pig and poultry production. Equine welfare science probably only in the last 25, 30 years became a thing. But there's been so much work There's work looking at how horses cope with what we do to them. There's work looking at how we can how to understand the impact of things we do, like whether it's nose bands or hyperflexion or the biomechanics, how horses actually move. How horses learn. This is one of the biggest ones, the whole learning theory. And I have a reference to McGreevy's book at the end, and I really recommend that to anyone who hasn't read it. And there are every discipline, racing, dressage, eventing, every discipline has its people who look critically at what goes on and tries to improve things. So there's been interesting work in the UK, and I was sorry to miss Eric's talk this morning, but interesting work in the UK on risk factors around falls and fatalities in eventing. So lots of work. How do we translate that work into practice? And this is, to me, one of the biggest things we face. A friend of mine, Mette Uldal, is a Danish vet. I don't know if any of you know her. She's done a lot of work on mouth lesions. And she said late last year, I thought it was a really interesting thing, we need to pick our battles, really, is what she's saying. We have to follow the roads that lead to better horse welfare, which have already been documented through evidence. So the energy of change is not used on solutions that prove ineffective or downright wrong. That's why you need the evidence, because then it's going to work. Whereas if you just pick some idea out of the sky and you put a lot of energy into it, it may not work, and you've wasted that energy. You've probably wasted the support that you've gathered from other people. So just think about what is going to work, and that's generally from something that's evidence-based. What are the barriers to translating this evidence? We probably look a lot at the physical health, and we don't think enough about the mental health of the horses. We all know we are traditional horse people. There's so much about the horse world that is very traditional, and there's a mindset that can be resistant to change. And again, as competition people, we possibly prioritise performance over welfare indicators. We're inclined not to see the signs of distress or discomfort, or the horse doesn't really want to be doing what you're asking it to do in the pursuit. We ignore them in the pursuit of the medal or the ribbon or the Group 1. But I think a really important thing is, how do you access this information? And in this information age, or so-called information age, when there's so much misinformation, how do you discern the good from the bad? That is a really, really crucial thing. So I think one way is triangulation. So if you hear it from someone and someone else validates it for you, that's probably someone that you trust, obviously. And I think we need to do more. I think organisations like Eventing Ireland, Horse Racing Ireland, all sorts of people, I think there's a need for coming together, developing some sort of a portal for high quality information where people can trust what they read, what they're being told. There's too much on Facebook, social media. That's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. But these people are influencers. They know how to present it as if it's the new golden dawn, and is actually not based on anything like proper science. Translating the evidence into practice. This is kind of a more complicated way of saying the same thing. But if you're going to intervene and try to translate that evidence into practice, you have to do it where people are. Academics in their ivory towers are not going to get that information out there. Back to the podcast, our first guest next week talks about this. How do we translate? And she's talking about infographics, because sometimes we just don't have the time anymore to be reading a long scientific paper. But a lot of scientific papers nowadays, they're obliged to produce an infographic which summarises the findings in an easy to digest format. And she's a big fan of this idea, and I think it's a really good one. So I think there are ways we can do it, and someone mentioned YouTube. Sharon, you were talking about YouTube. Again, if high quality videos on YouTube, it makes it very digestible. You know what I mean? So there are resources, but just use your critical faculties. Don't believe everything you see or read. I think interactive learning experiences, so nothing beats hands-on, in the yard, in the stable, people and horses together. rather than virtual. So I'm not saying we're going to walk away from clinics and coaching sessions because they're really important. I think we need welfare ambassadors. I think every discipline needs welfare ambassadors who are prepared to stand up there and say, this is what we want, this is what it should be, this is what we stand for. And I'll talk a little bit later about 2 ideas I have in my head about reflective practice groups and no fault zones that I think we could think about. So again, we have another scale here. Where do we want to see our horses? The earlier scale was about where are we? Where do we want to see our horses? This comes from the Brook, which is a brilliant equine welfare charity in the UK. The question they ask, is the horse flourishing? Do we want our horse to have a life not worth living? No one wants that. What we of course want is a good life. The balance on the scale is strongly positive. You follow good practice recommendations and they stand well above minimum standards. So again, when the very first lecture we had in our program, our master's program, wasn't about the history of animal welfare, which I thought it would be about. It was actually about a concept called positive welfare, because we think about welfare and it's one of those words that people go, oh, because we're thinking about cruelty. And we kind of mix the two up, and you think about the Irish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. That's all on the negative side. But a big move in animal welfare science nowadays is to the right of that scale. It's about positive welfare, providing opportunities, positive opportunities for animals in terms of enrichment and being sure that we meet their behavioural needs. About 15 years ago, an equine behaviourist came up with this concept, and have many people in the room heard of the 3 Fs? Yeah, good, brilliant. It's to me, it's one of the biggest, the most significant and easy to remember and easy to implement things that we've had in equine welfare science. I think it could go a bit further, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But as a concept, forage, friends, freedom has to be a winner, and it's easy to remember, and we can all do it. It's not rocket science. But of course, competition workload, weight management, travelling, the value of our animals. These are all the things that put us under pressure and end up with us restricting, whether it be forage, whether it be socialisation, whether it be freedom of movement. It's just the way we are, it's just the structures we have set up. And what I'm hoping in the second part is to give us some ideas of why we shouldn't be restricting them, and ways that maybe we can improve things. So if we look at forage, why I told you earlier about the 16 hours a day of grazing on low quality forage. The horse's stomach, and I don't like mentioning rugby after the couple of days we've had, but the horse's stomach is the size of a rugby ball. Just think about that. So it empties very quickly, and there's continuous acid being produced. So we feed them, if they're lucky, 3 meals a day. That does not mimic what the natural feeding pattern is. If we don't give them enough hay, of course they're going to eat it as quickly as it's put to them. Then they get bored, and then we get stress. We get stereotypies like box walking and windsucking. But primarily we get ulcers, and that's a whole topic in itself. But there are ways of managing and reducing ulcers. I don't think people are easy to say, particularly for racehorses actually. People are very quick to say, oh, they all have them. But there are ways of managing them. You can also get blood sugar spikes, and the microbiome can be disrupted. Forage restriction increases stress, slows metabolism, make weight management harder. So all the signs are saying don't restrict the forage. Now, I know you're concerned about to put down weight, but there are ways of providing forage, again, using your ingenuity, using your problem-solving abilities, slow feeders, trickle feeders. There are ways of providing it that will help with the horse's natural digestive capacity, and you'll end up with happier horses and fewer of these problems. Horses are social creatures, we all know this, because that's how they regulate their emotions. They feel better when they're in company. We know the horses who hate being taken away from their group. Now, again, I'm speaking generalities here, and there are also, of course, individual horses with individual preferences. But in general, they're a herd animal. They like a consistent social group. They don't like that group being disrupted. And it's not For most horses, it's not actually just about being in a group of horses. It's being in a group with their buddies or their one buddy. So we just need to think about that, because if we stress them if we do a lot of this moving and changing, we cause more stress. And of course, if we've also restricted the space that they're in, they can't get away from the buddies or the companions they don't like, but they can, they may be too close to others. So just think about their sociability and how important it is that they are with congenial companions as much as possible. And I said horses are designed to move in a natural, in that prairie situation. It wasn't just a manicured paddock like I showed you earlier. It was varied terrain. There was gravel, stones, riverbanks, rivers, up and down. And we probably don't provide enough of that. I mean, some of the race courses in the UK, there's rubber matting the whole way from the stable yard into the parade ring and out onto the track. And I sometimes think that's maybe not ideal. It looks great, but maybe it's not ideal. Maybe there should be a little bit more variety, a bit more, and when I'm saying all this, I'm trying really hard not to sound like I'm preaching. I have not come in here from outside with a clipboard telling you this is what you should be doing, because I am trying to do this on our own farm. And we talked about putting down rubber in various places. And I said, no, we're not going to put down rubber. We have some kind of roughish, gravelly places. I think it's good, particularly for the young stock, to learn proprioception, where to put their feet, and that they have to pick them up here and they have to stretch a bit more there. So we didn't put down the rubber. That we also probably couldn't afford it. But anyway, they're designed to move. That's really important, and that's what. Certainly when Lauren Fraser developed the 3Fs concept, this was freedom of movement. That's what she was talking about. And if you limit space the way we do, you reduce the natural social behaviours, you lead to all the physical health problems. Like vets would be out of business by and large if horses were allowed more free space. But we get colic, we get lameness, we get poor hoof health, and we get the whole psychological side. We get the stress, the frustration, the boredom. A lot of those, if not all, would be eliminated if we had bigger turnout area, more turnout. I just wanted to, this is a provocation, because I think Lauren Fraser nowadays, if you asked her, would probably say that freedom is not just freedom to move, but it's freedom of choice. Now, this is a harder thing to think about. I struggle with it. The idea that we should offer our horses choice. Because as we manage them currently, they don't really have a choice in where they go, who to socialise with, when or what to eat, or when to rest. Their schedule is dictated by our schedule. This paper from 2016 is by some Norwegian researchers. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's about rug choice. Yeah. So a group of horses, I think it was 23 horses in the group, they trained them to decide whether they wanted their rugs on or off or no change. And over 3 weeks, I think, they got them all trained. And not only that, if it was hot, then they put them into the weather situations where if it was hot or it was cold. And again, the horses chose whether they wanted to wear their rugs or not. They have that ability. We just don't recognise it in them. Did they want? It depended. Yeah, most of them said, yeah, I want it off when it's hot and I want it on when it's cold. Yeah, absolutely. So fascinating stuff, and we don't ask those questions. But maybe if we did, we'd be surprised by the answers. And I just saw this on the internet the other night. Instead of bringing your dog for a walk around the block, bring the dog out, but let him decide where he wants to go. And they call them sniffaries. And they might only go from here to the entrance building, but they'll stop and they'll sniff and they'll, and it could take a half an hour, it could take an hour. But they have the choice. They're doing what they want to do. They're getting so much satisfaction out of it. So maybe our horses, sometime maybe just, instead of going down the lane and you want to go right, maybe just see which way do they want to go and stop and sniff, and just something to think about. as I say, not here to preach, just saying this is what the wider world of equine welfare science is looking at, and sort of stuff that they're talking about. So I'm just flicking through here some examples of social stabling, social housing. It can be done. Now, look, the Irish weather, the Irish climate, not ideal for some of what I'm showing you. There's expense involved, of course. This on the right, they're 2 stallions. That's based on work done at the Swiss National Stud. And horses obviously like visual contact, but they love physical touch. And this allows horses in adjacent boxes to touch each other. But they also have an area down here, this here, where they can get away if they're not happy. And the way that's designed, that's only between 2 boxes, so that there's only 2 horses at a time can interact. And of course they pick and choose. They don't, if it's not working, they will of course swap them out. But it's just really interesting. And in the first couple of days when they started this, they had a few abrasions, a few marks on their neck from the bars. So you can see now they pad them a bit more, but it's worked really, really well. So the idea came from the Swiss National Stud, but this is a setup in Germany. This is our attempt at social turnout, in that we have heavy enough land. We don't have many. Over the winter, the yearlings are out. Our mares are in they're in all-weather paddocks like this, in groups of 3, and there's I think there's 3 things in a row down there, with 3 or 4. If there's 3 mares, it'll be 4 spots for hay, so that there's a bit of choice and not too much fighting. I got these, Aisling King, is she here? No. I got these pictures from Aisling. This is a setup in Italy. Again, the horse has a choice. Do they want to be in? Do they want to be out? There's a lying area. There's a sand area. I think I have another photo from the other direction. So choice, they've the option. And some of our leading trainers have, racehorse trainers have similar setups to this. This is Tinnakill again. I argue with our manager because I want more of those taken out. At least they can be taken out and put back in. But we do this. We've communication between all the stalls. This is another one of our all-weather paddocks. I got that picture taken as soon as we had the new shavings down, so it looked so it looked better. This is the Irish National Stud, a repurposed barn. Again, very social. Plenty of opportunity to touch each other, and I love this setup. Have anyone been to Caffrey in Enniskillen? So this is active turnout. This is the holy grail as far as I'm concerned, because it has the varied terrain, it has the shade, shelter, they're growing. This photo is they're growing some shrubby things, things that they can browse on as well as graze. They have feeding stations, water stations. They have sand. This is sand. This is gravel. I think this is fantastic. And look, it's not everyone can do it, but it's really, really important to know that this exists and it can be done. And again, I'm saying you're ingenious, problem-solving people. Think about your setup at home and see what you can do. So what can I do? Moved on very quickly. What can I do? You can assess the needs, and I mentioned the 5 domains model. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Provide positive experiences, and I altered this slide only last night because I put in including choices. So not just providing the positive experience that you think the horse needs, but put in the positive experience that they can choose for themselves. So that choice thing, it's a little bit hard to get your head around, but I think it's the way we're going to have to go. And of course, really important, understand how horses communicate. Don't impose and I think, Sharon, I probably came in just after you had said something about we tend to read human emotions into what the horses are telling us, when actually the horses are maybe telling us something different. So try to work out what they're saying, not what you think they're saying. So the 5 domains model is, if you're in anything in animal welfare nowadays, the 5 domains model is kind of the go-to standard, and it's a really useful one because it looks at the impacts of things that happen to the animal, or things that happen in their life. But it's the most important thing about it. It's not just how much hay we give them, or how much turnout, or how much veterinary care. It's actually, how does the horse feel about this. And as far as the 5 domains model goes, if the horse doesn't feel good about whatever you're providing, their welfare is poor. So this is, and what it does is you can take each aspect of their life and you can systematically measure it based on this model. So it's a really, really good framework, and everyone in animal welfare science is kind of the gold standard. So you're thinking, oh, how can I learn more? Well, one way we can do it is this online course, which I really recommend, run by Christina Wilkins, organised by her, but with David Mellor, the originator. He's in the background of it. It's an online course, How to Assess the Welfare of Horses Used in Sport. I have negotiated, at enormous expense, no, I've negotiated a discount. If you just say you were here today, email Christina, tell her you were here today, she'll give you a discount on the course. I think it's really, really worth doing. I also think for people, I know that this is there's HSI points for today for some people. I think someone, I don't know how it works, but someone should talk to HSI about getting points for this course, because it's really, really good. It takes a bit of time. It's probably something maybe for over the winter. It takes a bit of time, and you can't move on to the next section until you've completed the first, each section. But I just think it's the best thing out there in terms of learning about the 5 domains. The good news, I just had to put this paper in because this will give you heart. This paper was done in France. They looked at 56 high-level sport horses, international show jumpers and eventers in 13 different yards. And they looked at whether these yards were implementing the 3 Fs, right? And these are high-level yards, they were implementing the 3 Fs. Then they measure the welfare of the horses according to a protocol. They measured the welfare of the horses on the yards. And they found that when there were fewer restrictions around the 3 Fs, the welfare score was better. So in their home stable, the better their welfare with the fewer restrictions. And it shows that adhering to the 3 Fs and providing all those opportunities is not in conflict with competition and success at the highest level, because some of these horses were Olympic horses. So it can be done. So again, if anyone wants a copy of that, just let me know. But I think it's really good to know that there's evidence. Evidence is there that it can be done. And I've had a couple of chats with people over lunch about this. It's not just about the horses, it's about the people. Knowing all this is not enough. Preaching, me trying to preach, doesn't work. You need to think, what really makes people tick? What's their emotional connection? What really resonates with them? A lot of it is around social norms, what we all do. You don't want to be the outlier who does things differently, because that's a lonely place to be. And there are also practical barriers. I've mentioned them already, like finance and weather and land. But think about, what does a good horse person look like? Think about how you would like to be perceived as a good horse person and how you would act if you were a good horse person. So human behaviour change is a hugely important part of this. I have these thoughts. These are just my own personal thoughts, and I've presented this at in other forums as well. I think for groups like Eventing Ireland, I think there's space for people to have to think about this, but you feel, I don't want to be the one, you don't want to ask the question here today, but you'd like to be in a kind of a safe space where you could chat about it. And I wonder whether the various equestrian bodies, and that would include racing, could set up some sort of these little reflective practice groups. These happen in hospitals when there's adverse incidents. People sit down in confidence and talk about what went wrong. Now, you may have an issue and you're wondering whether what I do is right, and you want to talk, you want to bounce it off someone. And I'm just wondering whether the equestrian and racing bodies could maybe set something up. I also think there's space for one-on-one. You just want to talk to someone, please, tell me, did I do okay, or was that wrong? You just kind of want someone to talk it through with, and I call that a no-fault zone. And if anyone wants to talk to me, I'm more than happy to listen to your woes. But it's based on this idea of what happened. Tell us what happened. Okay, yeah, okay. So, so what? What's the implications for you, for the horse, for the yard, for whatever? But what is going to happen now? Now what? What's the future? What are you going to change? And I think this is really powerful. So it's just, as I say, it's my own concept. I'm trying to put it out there and see if anyone bites. But if anyone here from Eventing Ireland or Horseport Ireland or anyone wants to talk to me about it more, I'm more than happy to chat. Because I think we all want a welfare-aware culture. What does that look like? I think all of us in our various disciplines and whatever we do, we want to be part of a culture of excellence, and you cannot be an excellent organisation or body unless welfare is at the heart of it. You need buy-in at all levels, and that means from the yard right up to the top table of whatever organisation you're involved in. Every small step counts. An extra hour of turnout, an extra variety, some variety of forage, whatever you might do, loosening that noseband, whatever little thing it is going to make a difference. So don't think it has to be massive changes. The tiniest little thing is going to make a difference, because that's continuous improvement. So, back to Changing Rein, because I can't help myself. Karen and I have developed, or we're in the process of developing, a quiz, a tool that helps you think about these things. Now, it's in the very early stages of development. That QR code will bring you to it if you want to use your phone, or if you want to scribble down that link, that will also bring you to it. There are no right, it's a quick quiz, it takes just 7 or 8 minutes. There are no right or wrong answers, but what it will give you is I suppose it describes your attitude or your approach to communicating with other horse people and your attunement to your horses. We, would love you to do the quiz. Secondly, we would love to get your feedback. And if you give us your email, which you don't have to, obviously, but if you give us your email, we will include you in more communications about this, because this is the mission of Changing Rein. I know I'm not here to push it or promote it, but this is what we're trying to do, is just get people thinking. And so, and also I think maybe if you even go onto the website, you'll find the quiz, but certainly that's a QR code, or come up to me afterwards and I'll give you the link. And just so you'll be drowning in QR codes, this QR code brings you to the resource list. This is the references to all the papers that I mentioned, some useful websites, some videos, various bits and pieces that I thought might be interesting for you. And again, some people have access. Most of the papers are actually open access, so you can get them in full. If not, contact me and I can get you a PDF. I can send it on to you. But that was just a very quick run through a topic that I think it sounds like something out there. It's something that affects all of us. It's something that we all can make a difference in. That social license is ours to lose, each one of us. And by making those small changes, doing those small things, we can all ensure that equestrian sport holds onto that social license and actually flourishes. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I thought I'd get away with it.